It has been 3 days since Russia for the first time used its latest hypersonic ballistic missile Oreshnik against military targets in Ukraine. And with each new day, it becomes clear how this latest Russian missile finally destroyed the plans of the West regarding Ukraine. The fact is that the United States, Britain, and France allowed the Ukrainian army to fire ATACMS ballistic missiles and Storm Shadow cruise missiles deep into Russian territory for a reason. Washington, Paris, and London were sure that this decision would put Russia in an unfavorable military-political situation. The fact is that the West was confident that Russia was very weak in terms of having intermediate and shorter-range missiles in its arsenal. Indeed, on December 8, 1987, after Gorbachev signed the treaty between the USSR and the United States on the elimination of stocks of intermediate-range and shorter-range land-based missiles, Moscow lost its strategic advantage over the West. In this regard, Western countries were sure that Russia's only trump card was nuclear weapons, which Moscow would never use, fearing a retaliatory strike. That is why all this time the West has so brazenly and unceremoniously crossed all the red lines of Russia. The United States, Britain, and France were confident that the shelling of Russian territory with the help of American ballistic missiles and Franco-British cruise missiles would force Russia to make concessions in the current conflict and form a front line beneficial to Kiev before the talks with Moscow. However, on November 21, 2024, in the city of Dnipro, after the destruction of the weapons factory Yuzmash by the latest Russian hypersonic ballistic missile Oreshnik, all the plans of the West collapsed like a house of cards. By showing the full power of the latest Russian missile, Vladimir Putin made it clear to the West that Russia has intermediate and shorter-range missiles, which are much superior to Western samples in terms of their tactical and technical characteristics. My dear truth seekers, the latest Russian hypersonic ballistic missile Oreshnik has really become a game-changer weapon. At the moment, judging by the incoming information from NATO countries, it becomes clear that the West has begun to gradually change its rhetoric towards Russia. In particular, insiders in Washington declared that after Russia used its latest hypersonic ballistic missile Oreshnik, the Trump administration decided not to play with fire and agreed to all of Putin's terms regarding Ukraine. This information was also confirmed by the authoritative British newspaper, The Guardian. In particular, this British newspaper, citing its own sources in the White House, said that Trump is seriously considering accepting Moscow's terms, which Vladimir Putin announced in June this year. At the same time, the British newspaper stressed that Trump would agree to give Ukraine to Russia only on condition that Moscow break its alliance with China. Well, my dear truth seekers, if you ask me, I would tell you that Vladimir Putin will never betray allied relations with China. Moreover, I am absolutely sure that the United States will agree to all of Moscow's conditions in any case, especially given the fact that after the appearance of the latest hypersonic ballistic missile Oreshnik in Russia's arsenal, Washington finally realized that the United States does not have a single chance against Russia in the event of a nuclear conflict. The fact is that at the moment, there is not a single missile in the US arsenal that, in terms of its tactical and technical characteristics, could be on a par with Russian ballistic and nuclear missiles. The situation around Ukraine has prompted many journalists, experts, and top-ranking US officers to start discussing a possible nuclear conflict between Moscow and Washington. Many in the United States, including parliamentarians and officials, are discussing the need to upgrade the Pentagon's nuclear missile arsenal. American experts admitted that the United States may be left without its key nuclear weapons. We are talking about the B-83 nuclear bomb, developed back in the 1970s. Although the B-83 nuclear bomb is considered obsolete, it is still one of the main types of US Air Force nuclear weapons. Let me remind you that in 2021, President Biden's administration decided to continue to fund the maintenance of the B-83 nuclear bomb. However, President Biden subsequently didn't list that nuclear bomb in his 2022 nuclear posture review. This fact caused heated discussions in Congress. U.S. Representative for Colorado's 5th Congressional District, a member of the Republican Party, Doug Lamborn, declared that this decision by Biden doesn't make much sense, since the United States will not be able to replace the B-83 nuclear bomb with other weapons in the near future. In case of nuclear conflict, there is nothing we can do to counter the Russians, said Doug Lamborn. Earlier, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence of the United States, Avril Haines, published an open report stating that Russia is expanding and improving its nuclear arsenal and building up strategic weapons capabilities, which poses a major danger to Washington. According to U.S. intelligence estimates, Moscow considers its nuclear capabilities necessary to ensure deterrence and fulfillment of tasks in the event of a potential conflict with the United States and NATO. According to American experts, Russia now has the most advanced nuclear weapons in the world. And this fact worries the American authorities very much. According to official data, the share of modern weapons and military equipment in Russia's nuclear triad, which includes strategic aviation, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and nuclear submarines, is 88%. After the new generation Sarmat missile system enters service with Russia, the level of modern nuclear weapons of the Russian army will be 100%. Military experts attribute the superiority of the Russian nuclear arsenal to the fact that the Pentagon has not been engaged in the development and improvement of ballistic missiles for 30 years. The fact that the United States canceled a test launch of the upgraded Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile, ostensibly to show Washington's peaceful intentions, actually indicates that the Americans were not able to introduce anything new into the so-called upgraded missile and decided not to show their failure to the world. Now, to replace the Minuteman III, the United States is creating a new LGM-35, a Sentinel missile, which should enter the troops only from 2029. The remaining nuclear missile elements of the U.S. weapons can also be updated only in 15 years. Moreover, the American LRSO nuclear-armed cruise missile for heavy bombers should enter service by 2025 and replace the very old AGM-86B air-launched cruise missile, which is more than 40 years old. My friends, considering all of this, it can be concluded that after the collapse of the USSR, the United States didn't believe that Russia would be able to regain its military power and superpower status. This strategic mistake of Washington led to the fact that for 30 years, instead of developing its nuclear arsenal and creating hypersonic missiles, the United States spread democracy through color revolutions and the bombing of Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, and Syria. At the moment, the United States is far behind Russia not only in the field of strategic nuclear weapons, but also in hypersonic ones. And this fact puts Washington in a very vulnerable position in the event of a nuclear conflict. Thus, as you can see, the West, led by the United States, once again made a strategic mistake in believing that after 1991, Russia would never be able to regain its superpower status. All this led to the fact that 30 years later, the United States witnessed the rebirth of Russia as a global superpower, while losing Washington's global dominance from both an economic and military point of view. At the same time, it is worth noting that this is just the beginning. The degradation and decline of the West will only gain momentum, and this trend will continue for the next 30-40 years.